Redditors, we all have that one friend who always seeks attention using made up stories. What's the dumbest thing that she came up to impress everybody but failed dramatically? 2 stories stand out. 1. He was a Gulf War veteran. Except, dude, you were born in 1981 and the Gulf War was 1991 to 1992 when we were in 5th grade. Congrats on being an 11-year-old combat veteran. 2. His uncle had taught him to fly an Air Force jet. By his telling, his uncle was a mechanic in the Air Force. They had one jet that apparently nobody could fix. But this uncle, through sheer mechanical savantism, fixed the jet. The Air Force, ignoring all fiscal law, apparently was so grateful to this mechanic that they gifted him the jet. He then flew the jet to our tiny local airport, where he taught my acquaintance how to fly it. Please tell me an adult told you. Number 2. Taekwondo. A couple years back, this guy had no friends, had the wildest stories. Told me how he was lost in a field with nothing but a machete, decided to throw it and it killed a cow. Or how he said that he was in Taekwondo because his family was being hunted by spies in Russia and that's why he moved to Canada. He's a 2nd Dan black belt while I'm a 1st Dan. Still don't get how he thought we'd believe his stories, including he was 13 at the time. The place I go to doesn't really care about your age for black belt, but you do have to be over 12 to get 2nd Dan. For those wondering, it isn't really a pay to get black belt. It took me 6 years of training for mine and the guy 7-8 years for 2nd Dan. 2nd Dan is actually quite nice for a 13-year-old. I became friends with one of my best buddies because he claimed to have Raichu in Super Smash Bros. Melee. The foundation of our friendship was built on a lie. We're still friends though. In retrospect, this is so ridiculous, but as a kid, I had a friend who swore he had a twin brother. It was pretty obvious that he didn't, since he lived in the same neighborhood as the majority of our friend group, and we all spent a lot of time out and about together on bikes, etc. Not to mention that all of our parents were friendly, and we had all of our birthday parties, barbecues, etc. together as kids. But anytime he was pressed about it, he would say that his twin brother was living with his aunt in Utah. This lasted until we graduated from high school, and now whenever one of us sees him in public, we always make sure to ask if his brother is doing good, and if he's been to Utah lately. Hope he turned out alright. Him. Standing at the foothills of the Himalayas gazing at the peaks of the Andes. It's me. But you can't. Him. Been there, have you? No? Well, I think I know what I saw. Me. K. This was back when we were still in our teenage years, but still. A friend of mine had an elaborate lie that he was a professional motocross driver during when we were 12 years old. All his friends knew he was pulling it out of his butt. He never went to train or competitions. He didn't even own a freaking motorcycle, but still told us about it several times a week, unprompted. This went on for more than a year. We still give him crap about it. Hey guys, I just had an awesome weekend. Yeah, my weekend was pretty sweet. I did the motocross stuff again. I don't want to bore you guys, but I did a sweet 720 spin. Yeah, so I played Smash and I remember when I had time to play games before my totally sweet motocross career got started. You guys are lucky. He's a senior employee where I work, in EMS. I heard him give a verbatim account of his mother-in-law reading The Exorcist and getting so freaked out that she threw the book in the river. He claimed to have seen that happen, bought a new copy, soaked it in water, and then replaced the wet copy in her nightstand, which led to her losing her crap. The problem is that I read that same Reddit thread like a week before. I never confronted him, but it makes me put all his epic tales of how he saved a life in perspective. I truly wish you had confronted him that it was from Reddit, and that he would have pretended he wrote the post and that it was his username. And then for the rest of your time working together, he'd have to watch that person's Reddit account on the daily to make sure he was up to date on his life of lies in case anything strange or cool happened in his life of lies. I had a friend in high school try to convince everyone that he came from a filthy rich family. Eventually, after a multitude of demonstrations, I became involved in one of his elaborate ploys. He came up with a story of how he needed a ride home after school and I didn't have a reason not to, so I obliged. He directed me towards one of the most wealthy neighborhoods in my city and had me follow another car through the gates of a private community of mansions. He told me to wait for a second after I dropped him off at one of the huge butt estates. Minutes later he came out of the house visually distressed and told me to drive away and leave him at a nearby park. I don't remember the story I believed him telling me as an explanation, but I later found out that he was actually from a family on welfare and the house that he brought me to belonged to a person he briefly met and he was angrily kicked out after he entered their house spontaneously without mentioning anything to anyone that lived there. Afterwards I realized that his plan was for me to drop him off and validate his huge butt house and wealth to everyone at school. The stories he told everyone about his wealth fell through soonly afterwards. This one was just kind of sad. I told her I could not keep hearing her go on about her boyfriend who had started using and selling drugs. Let me know when she cut ties with that crowd. Less than 2 hours later, I get a breathless call from a strange number. She has packed up and got out of his place, was staying in a motel. I asked how she got the money and she mumbled something about a friend who met her and gave her money but was out of town and she couldn't stay at their actual place. I figured it was crap but decided to play along and make her give herself away. I said, oh, my sister-in-law is nearby. I'm gonna send her over with some groceries. Which motel is it? Immediately she starts going on, no, I don't need that. Don't send anyone, but would not tell me the motel name. Said, oh, I don't know. I asked how you check into a motel and not know the name of it. Go look outside. Read me the sign. She just kept dodging around and saying not to worry about it. She said she would call me back the next day and we rang off. On a hunch, I called the number back and her roommate at the boyfriend's place picked up. She hadn't gone anywhere, just called me from a different number. The roommate put her on the phone and she started yelling at me for calling her back. I told her when she quit lying and really got help, let me know. That was the last time I heard from mom for a while. That twist ending though. I no longer have this friend, but I used to. He used to claim that 1. His dad was in Green Day. 2. Green Day taught him how to walk and talk. 3. He lived in Hollywood for one day of his life and met several hundred celebrities during that day. 4. He was the fastest runner on the planet, but his mom told him to disguise his actual speed because people would make fun of him. 5. He was in a rock band at age 9. 6. His dad was also a video game developer and made special games for him as presents. 7. His parents got him a bazooka for Christmas. 8. He had a Pokemon called Mew. 3. 9. He was Hitler's great-grandson. I'll let you take a guess how many of these claims were actually true, but at least he was a kid and not a full-grown adult. My friend in high school tried to tell us that a lady from the old people's home next door had climbed over her fence and died on her lawn. We checked with her mum. Absolute rubbish. What a morbid thing to lie about. I remember my first year at uni. The hall I was living in was pretty good friends with the hall below us. One of the guys in the hall below us, let's call him Craig, was very socially awkward. He lived quite close to the university and went home every weekend. He liked to talk about how much he drank with his family over the weekend, and I'll try to list off what he claims he drank on a single night. 3 bottles of wine, 1 bottle of ouzo, 2 bottles of vodka, 12 pints of lager. Mysteriously though, when he drinks with us he's sick after 1 pint. Oh, and one time he randomly picked up with a story about how when he was out back home some guy kept staring at him, so he beat the crap out of him. That's the whole story, completely unprompted. Everyone just sort of said, well, that was probably an overreaction, Craig. Guy was called Sean and I went to high school with him. He didn't seem to have any awareness of how ludicrous and totally unbelievable his stories were. And when he told stories, he conflated the tepid reactions of embarrassment and disbelief for expressions of disinterest, so he'd make the stories more unbelievable. The stupidest one he ever told was basically this. So I was at the beach on the weekend surfing, and as I was catching a wave into shore, this great white shark came right up beside my board. So I hopped off my board onto the shark's back and then rode him into the shallows. Really? I mean, who in the world would ever believe something like that? I actually laughed at the imagery of him jumping on the shark's back as if it were a dolphin. I had an online friend who said he was secretly in the Marines and then got kicked out for being too good. He was 14 at the time. He would tell me all sorts about how he is now classed as a dangerous weapon and half the government wanted to protect him whilst the other half wanted him dead. There were lots of fables about skills and training he had and how he'd seen his best mate explode, etc. The funny thing is I was friends with his cousin who went to my school and I would always ask about his weird cousin and his lies. He was never in the Marines. He was in the cadets for a while though, and whenever I would confront Marine Boy, he would tell me that his family can't know the truth about him and that's why his cousin wasn't aware. I ended up talking to him years later on Facebook and brought up how funny it was that he used to pretend to be a Marine. Unfortunately, he was apparently with his girlfriend during that conversation and I had revealed a part of his past he definitely wanted to keep secret. I found his embarrassment to be a relief though. I was happy to know he'd at least come to his senses. Well, you know how it goes. The Marines don't like to have anyone too good. It makes things unfair for other countries. I worked with a woman at a grocery store in Bumfrick, Wyoming, who claimed she used to party with Khloe Kardashian. She used to be a stripper, all kinds of crazy stories. I was 15 at the time and I remember it being the first time I wondered what people gained from telling these outrageous and false stories. Math teacher from high school. Dude was late 60s or early 70s and he was an butthole and terrible at teaching. Anyway, he'd go on and give the class a 15-minute speech on dedication, hard work, perseverance, etc. and relating it to the NFL, football. To you non-Americans, class would ask WTF he's talking about, and he'd be like, "Oh, you didn't know? I was the starting running back for the Green Bay Packers back in some year." Students would look online and see there's nothing on the guy and call him out on it the next day of class. Teacher's explanation was totally fake, like the internet wouldn't have his info because the Packers moved to a different city later, so all records got erased. Another time he was going off on how he was a Marine in the Vietnam War, and all of his stories about it didn't really add up. Some kid in the class was from a big military family and asked what platoon, brigade rank, etc. he was in, and teacher gave an answer that didn't even exist. He wouldn't even make up that he met a famous person, but that they were really good friends. He didn't just meet President Bush Sr., they were roommates in college. Not only did he hang out with some famous author a lot, but he, teacher, was the main character in one of his books and teacher was a big inspiration to the author. Just a bunch of crap like that. I think there was a story about him being in charge of some covert operations secret spy stuff, but I missed that day of class. And no, he wasn't just teasing us and messing around. He was totally serious. Kids would call him out on his stories of grandeur and he'd double down trying to prove his case, even though no one was buying his stories or being all that impressed by them. The Packers moved to a different city later. The Packers are publicly owned and have never moved. LOL. He was saying that he used to live in America, but came back to the UK after his American wife was killed. Decapitated in fact, in a car accident. Then he told us all about this amazing green card that he had, that was permanent, so he could go back anytime. In fact, he offered to lend it to anyone who wanted to work in the US. Well, what he didn't know was that I was just about to go over there myself, on a contract, so I knew a bit about green cards. So I called him on it, in front of the whole room. "Yes, I'm going to the US in a couple of weeks. Look, here's my ticket and US currency. I happen to have them in my wallet right now. So, the card would be really useful. When can I come and get it?" Oh, he backpedaled so fast that he left burn marks on the carpet. Naturally, the wife also turned out to be a complete fantasy. I doubt he's ever been closer to the States than watching CSI. This is a very odd way of referring to CSI. I'm in Panama City right now and I sat by an old Vietnam veteran at McDonald's and he began to tell me and my friend how the government direct deposits $50 million in his bank every morning at 9 AM and that he personally bailed out GM and Wells Fargo. He kept spurring odd numbers and dates. Not a friend, but this was told to me when I started working at a new location. Had a guy that used to work for the company I work at. Went around and told people a fake name. Even make a fake FB for his alias. He then proceeded to tell everyone he couldn't do set-in work duties because he had developed cancer. This went on for many months and a lot of people believed him. This person even had a GF at the workplace using his fake name. He eventually got caught when an employee found his real FB. He ended up quitting a month or so when he had been discovered. I'm from Germany and there is this dude in our friend group that does that all the time. One time he was showing us a sketch he made and said this right here was never built before. It is a device that can turn off gravity. I am the kind of guy that likes to see those guys explain themselves deeper so everyone else realizes how dumb they are. So I asked him everything about it and it turns out he doesn't know crap about gravity. 2 weeks later he was telling us a story about a ketamine trip he had and everyone was enjoying the storytelling. The problem is that he thought that no one of us was watching English YouTube videos but he was wrong. I instantly knew that he was telling a story from a YouTuber that I watch. I was cringing a lot during that 15 minutes because he was telling it word for word. Seeing the look in his face that says heck yeah they buy it and knowing that he's lying was just way too entertaining. He is 23 BTW. One time he was telling us all of this crazy science stuff that clearly is out of a creepypasta or something stupid like that. I freaking had at that and called him out but he won't back down. I don't know how everyone else can just let them make things up and don't be bothered by it. I really freaking can't. I was in medical school, and I had this junior from my home state who recently got admitted to my school. Barely a week we'd known each other and he starts flexing on me about how he's been a player his whole life and how many chicks he'd boned, with really vivid descriptions of how it all went down. Every day he had a story of how crazy he used to be when drinking with his friends back home, how much weed he used to do, etc. He also proudly described every time his engineer father escaped being arrested for embezzlement and corruption, washing that off with a story of how his family had been providing for less fortunate kids in his area. He also had a lot of stories about how much money he's spent on a whim, how many flights he missed on purpose because he was hungover, and yet again how many random chicks he had slept with. He more than often contradicted himself with his own stories, but that was okay because he apparently had mild amnesia due to a biking accident while being drunk from a lit-up party. I've since then left the school to reapply in a new cycle due to me being critically sick and missing most of my classes and exams there. I don't consider him a friend, nor an acquaintance. In fact, I wish I never met the guy. I wouldn't like to be associated with such a douchebag pile of crap considering the career path I've chosen. Dude, med school is filled with weird butt people that make it endlessly entertaining. A hostess at a restaurant where I worked during college was always talking about her band. She came back after a weekend and said her band finally recorded a demo. Everyone was talking about it and played it in the back while doing food prep. She talked to me about it and I said that her singing voice sounded different than her talking voice. But if that's really her, then it's really good. In a month or two, Bring Me to Life by Evanescence got really popular and started playing on the radio. It was exactly this girl's demo. No one ever confronted her about it as far as I know. But I get a good laugh ever so often when I think about it. A few years ago I dated a guy for about 6 months. He clearly was on the spectrum for something and lied about many things. Obvious lies. Lies that were so absurd I couldn't figure out why he would think anyone would believe it. One of my faves was the Nicolas Cage story. Apparently they met and conversed for several minutes outside of a fancy Vegas club. He claimed he didn't even realize who he was talking to until a driver showed up with a car that read Cage on the plate. He also invented Thiz, whatever that is, and was best friends with E40. That Cage story doesn't sound that unbelievable. That dude pretty much lives in Vegas. He was on my last flight from NOLA to Vegas and one of my co-workers has a pic with him outside the Spearmint Rhino during his bachelor party. He's also a total weirdo so I could see not realizing who he is at first. I'm friends with this one guy I met in my senior year of high school and he was a huge bullshitter. He said we was working with this exclusive dev team based out of Europe. We live in the US West Coast on an action game that he claimed was in alpha. He said the game was fully functioning and that he would play it regularly. When he was a part of a larger group of friends I had, asked him about it, he would avoid the subject or divert a topic altogether. He would not tell us how to get to it, no store page, website, etc., and refused to show us screenshots of the game. He told us that the game was part of a larger Facebook group that was region locked to Europe only and had like 10 people total including him. My other friends and I knew something seemed off and called him out on it. Naturally, he brushed everything off, and to this day, he still hasn't provided proof that this game actually exists. TLDR. Friend said he was making this game without any proof of it existing, and we called him out on it but was too full of it to admit he was lying. To be fair, it could be a dev team group if it's in alpha, and he is avoiding ruining his career by withholding screenshots. So he should stop telling you about it. This didn't sound entirely different to me, apart from the telling people thing. But yes, he is probably certainly telling porcupines. At most it's a fan game or group hobby project he contributed a little to. Was in high school theater with a guy who was always talking about how he was a black belt in some kind of martial art. IDR which one, but I think it was Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai. Well, call him C. C was about 6 feet and probably 275 pounds. One day a new kid who we shall call S joins our cast. S is about 5 feet 7 and 135 pounds. S overhears C talk about his black belt in whichever style and is like, oh wow, that's awesome. So am I. We should spar. C agrees to this. I should clarify that this is all in the boys' dressing room during a rehearsal. I should also add that I knew S before he joined our cast and I was aware that he was actually a black belt in whichever martial art. So they get into their stances and begin to spar at like half speed. I don't remember the full play-by-play as this was several years ago, but I specifically remember C trying to hip toss S and failing horrifically just to have S roll off his back and hip toss him with ease. At the end C was sweating profusely and S looks like he took a leisurely stroll through the park. That's gonna be Jiu-Jitsu. Muay Thai doesn't have throws. Trust me, I know this crap. I have a black belt in every martial art. My uncle is the CEO of karate. So I had this friend in high school and she constantly had these outrageous stories that often ended up contradicting each other. You could never believe anything she said. I think she just wanted attention or something. Or perhaps it had to do with her autism with which she had been diagnosed, but she didn't want to accept the diagnosis and work on it. Anyway, the thing I remember most was the time she came to school with a cat bell on a ribbon around her neck. She had claimed her Japanese Korean friends. She was very much into anime and K-pop and such, which is not wrong but gives you more of an idea on the type of person she was, had come to visit her and surprised her by waiting for her on the road with bikes, and cycled with her to school and gave her that cat bell because they thought it was funny and she thought it was embarrassing, but she kept wearing it the whole day anyway. And also that time I got a boyfriend and was happy and telling the rest of our friend group about it. And then we mentioned that I was the first of our group to get a boyfriend, unless someone was hiding a boyfriend for some time. Well, guess what? Apparently she had a boyfriend now, who was Korean and had purple hair and lived close to her, and she didn't tell us because her parents didn't approve of the relationship and she didn't want to tell us the name of her boyfriend, so we had to guess and we never guessed it and stuff. So yay, I was very curious to see that boyfriend. And also she had had a boyfriend before but he had died in a car crash. Later it turned out to be a best friend though. So yay, it was very unclear, but deep down she was a sweet girl though. She probably just wanted attention. I really hope she's doing well in life now. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.